Greetings! Welcome to my third video in the series of how to play the BattleTech RPG, A Time of War. In the last video, we went over the general formula that all action checks take. In this video, we'll be going over the attribute checks in particular, and the two particular attribute checks that there are. There are single attribute checks and double attribute checks. We will not be going over skill checks in this video. Okay, so, attributes. There are 8 of them. We got strength, body, reflex, dex, intelligence, will, charisma, and edge. These are all very well defined in the book, so I will spare you a lengthy discussion of what they are. It's pretty straightforward common sense, except for edge, which is basically your luck attribute. Explaining that takes another video. So we'll just be explaining basically how these work. You make an attribute check when you're doing something that there's no real training for, or you're relying on, say raw strength just to pick something up. Or you're just testing your reflexes because someone randomly threw something at you. That's what attribute checks are used for. This is kind of what you'll see on the character sheet in the upper left-hand corner of the character sheet. You got your attributes, you got the attribute score, and the attribute link. The score is what we're primarily concerned about with attribute checks. The link is determined by the score that you have. The scores are generally between 1 and 10, with 10 being the upper limit of what makes sense for this universe, but there's rules for having an attribute score of higher than 10. All starting characters must have at least an attribute of 1. Anything lower than 1, and it's not a legal starting character, though your attribute can be reduced below 1 to 0 if you get, say, injured or something. The higher the score is, the better. The lower the score is, the worse. With 8 being the upper limit most people are capable of obtaining, with 4 being the average. So standard scores are 1 through 8, with 4 being the average. When creating your character or leveling up, you put XP into the score to create the score, and the link is determined by what that score is according to a chart. That chart is on the next page. You can find this chart on page 41 of A Time of War. You won't see score and link, they're not there. You'll just see these columns of numbers, which is a little annoying. But if you have a score of, say, 1, then you have a link of -2. Don't worry about how we got these. It's just a chart. Just follow it. And then if you have a score of somewhere between 2 and 3, you have a link of -1. These links get linked to skills. They are for skills, not the attribute checks, because a skill will be linked to a certain attribute that skill depends on. Say it's a career scientist skill. I believe that's linked to intelligence. So these links here are important for your skill checks, not your attribute checks. Yeah. So let's say we have a 4 in strength, that's +0. So on our character sheet, there would be a 4 here and a 0 there. And we only care about this for attribute checks. Moving on, enough of that. So, the single attribute check. The target number is 12. You have to meet or beat a 12 with 2d6 plus all the roll mods to get the modified roll. If the modified roll is equal to or greater than 2d6, you succeed. If less than, you fail. So, here's the formula. You roll your 2d6 plus your attribute score plus the difficulty modifiers to get your modified roll, right? And the difficulty mod is determined by the DM, really, or GM, really, because we're not playing D&D. Anyway, and we compare that modified roll to the TN of 12. I said that already. Let's give an example. Let's say we want to make a strength attribute check. Perhaps we want to lift a stone, a rather big stone. So, and let's say we're kind of beefy. We got a strength score of 6. Can we see that? Yeah, we can see that. We got a strength score of 6. And you say, DM man, I want to lift that rock. And the DM says, all right, well, it's kind of big, but it's dry because it's not raining, so the rock's not slippery, and it has some decent natural handholds to it. So it's not that hard to lift. Take a +1 to represent it not being that hard to lift. So difficulty mod 1, score 6. And then we'll roll our 2d6, and let's say we get a 7 on 2d6, right? In this case, we got 7, well, 6 plus 1 is 7, plus 7 is 14. So we got 14 on our modified roll. Compare that to the target number of 12. We succeeded by 2, so we got an MOS of 2. Hooray! And that's how we make a single attribute check. The double attribute check is very simple. The only difference is the target number is an 18, and we are in a double attribute check using 2 relevant attributes. So we add 2 different scores plus the difficulty mod assigned by the GM. For example, let's say you're playing a video game. It's a really hard video game, you're in a competition or something. That would be a reflex and dex double attribute check. So let's say your reflex score is 4. It's normal. Yeah, that's okay. Your dex is 5, a little above average. But let's say that it's hot. It's really hot wherever you're playing and your hands are sweaty. To represent that, the DM might give you a -1 penalty for your hands being sweaty. Yeah, and say we roll our 2d6 and we get a 10 on 2d6. Well, 5 minus 1 is 4, 4 plus 4 is 8, plus 10 is 18. So you can see how our modified roll is 18, and the target number to meet or beat is 18. So we got an MOS of 0, and we passed. If we got something lower than 18, say we had a -2, then this would be a 17, the modified roll, and we would have failed by 1. And I believe that's it. Yeah, that's it right there. Attribute checks are not that complicated. Have a good day.